Taylor Heinicke and the Falcons proved their doubters wrong and just saved Arthur Smith's job with an impressive 29-10 win over the Indianapolis Colts.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious and merry and festive episode of the Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. All you got to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And, of course, guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman. Been covering the Falcons for far too long, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP. Still going strong on this illustrious podcast. You may also know me as Mr. Drew, Sirius Black. And I want to wish a special Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all the everydayers out there that tune in to this podcast and make it their first listen, first watch each and every day. And if you want to become an everydayer and have, a great Christmas and ring in the new year and all that stuff and more, with your, daily Falcons content, make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today was an impressive 29-10 win for the Atlanta Falcons. We'll be talking quite a bit about Arthur Smith's job status now. Where is that at? Taylor Heinicke, how much credit goes to the Falcons' success, to that quarterback change. And we'll also talk some odds and ends, talking a little bit about some things that, the Falcons will be building on into the offseason based off of this game, some areas where they still need some work going into the offseason. Although, of course, we're not in full offseason mode because the season still has, some life in it left with the Falcons getting this win and sort of a must-win game. We've been talking about must-win games pretty much every week for, I don't know, since week 8, week 9, right? And, Falcons been pretty hit and miss, but, they certainly hit today. Wasn't a perfect game, but they mostly did everything right? It was sort of a complete complementary football game where you had both the offense and defense enhancing one another, right? You're seeing, when the defense is getting stops, which they've been consistently been able to do throughout the season, previous weeks, you weren't seeing the offense being able to build off of that momentum that the defense was giving them. And then you saw the offense this week score, and then the defense would go out there, get another stop. And you just sort of that feedback loop of success that we have just so rarely seen from the Falcons this year. Now they came out in this game, the Colts were able to go down the field and score on their opening possession. And the stat I saw on the broadcast was that was the first touchdown the Falcons have given up all year long on the opening drive, which I was unaware of. I figured early in the season they gave up one of those. So impressive for the defense to hold that mark but you were like, okay, well, this is maybe not the greatest omen. Then the Falcons go down the field. They get their own points on their opening drive, thanks to 2 explosive plays, a 32-yard run by Bijan Robinson, then set up the subsequent play, which was a 26-yard touchdown strike to Kyle Pitts. But we've seen this team get off to starts, good starts in these games, and then kind of go quiet for the second and third quarter and basically not show up again to the fourth quarter. But we saw this team, instead of doing that today on Christmas Eve, we saw them take the lead midway through the second quarter with a field goal to push it 10-7. And that drive had them go down the field. Younghoe Koo missed a 49-yard field goal that hit off the right upright. But the Colts had a neutral zone infraction on that play. The Falcons were able to subsequently convert the ensuing 4th and 1, and then Koo made up for it with a 23-yarder to give them that 10-7 lead. They probably should have had a touchdown. I think Heinicke was a little late on a throw to an open Bijan in the end zone. Bijan didn't get his feet down in bounds either. So that was one instance where the Falcons had to settle for 3 instead of 7. As I said, they weren't perfect. But you got, a 3 and out from the defense on the ensuing drive. Then the offense responds with another, a field goal, just before the half. And, the Falcons getting points at the end of the first half is, again, another rarity that we haven't seen this year, right? We've talked about that sort of middle 8, right? Those final 4 minutes of the first half, those opening 4 minutes of the second half. The Falcons have been talking about that. And the Falcons not only scored in those final 4, they also scored in the opening 4. So they scored twice in the middle 8. Again, I'm pretty sure they haven't done that all year long. And, you give, that drive at the beginning of the second half featured a lot of running, right? Saw a lot of Bijan started off, then you mixed in Patterson, and then Algier kind of finished it with a 31-yard touchdown run to give the Falcons a 20-7 lead at that point. There was another subsequent potential touchdown where the Falcons had to settle for a field goal later in the game because the Colts then responded with a field goal of their own, and the Falcons settled for another field goal. They weren't perfect in the red zone, 0 for 3 there, right? We'll talk a little bit about Heinicke's contributions to that a little bit later in the episode, but they were pretty effective moving the ball, mostly due to the ground game, right? We weren't convinced going into this game, or at least when I say we, I mean me, right? It's the royal we, me and you, right? And what I think is the correct opinion, so you automatically agree with my opinion. So that's why I say we. We didn't think the Falcons would be effective running the ball against this Colts defense, right? We know the Colts have given up a lot of yards this season, but with Grover Stewart back in the lineup, they have been one of the better run defenses in the NFL, but they look like a bad run defense. Falcons run for 177 yards. You saw a lot of good perimeter blocking that sprung the Falcons on some of those runs to the outside away from Grover Stewart. The Colts no tackle. You saw a healthier Falcons offensive line up front that I'm sure had a lot to do that. We apparently didn't need Parker Hesse, just needed Tucker Fisk. More on that later. But you also got a clean game from Taylor Heinicke, no turnovers. Heinicke did try to put the ball in harm's way a couple of times. But I know there were some people out there, I can't think of who, were very skeptical of Taylor Heinicke going into this game. Whoever those people are, they're looking silly at this point in time. But you also, not in addition to playing a clean game on offense, you were very disruptive with your pass rush up front on defense, right? 5 sacks, 11 quarterback hits on Gardner Minshew. And we talked about how you needed to see that in order to slow down this Colts offense. Now, the Falcons got some good news with Michael Pittman being out of this game, and I'm sure the Locked On Colts guys are talking about how Pittman's absence was a huge impact on the struggles of the Colts offense in this game. But the Colts offensive line did not play well. Again, 5 sacks. You got 2 from Zach Harrison, 1.5 from Calais Campbell, 1 by Caden Ellis, 1 by Richie Grant, 1 by Arnold Ebiketie. Bud Dupree was being very disruptive up front. You did get David Onyemata back in this game, but I didn't notice him out there all that much. I think the Falcons had him on a pitch count in this game. So, I'm sure that helped things for the Falcons up front, but it was mostly those other guys that were making the impact plays as far as the pass rush goes. But the impact of Michael Pittman, again, Locked On Colts probably has more on this, but he was the go-to option. He's like the 3rd in the NFL in targets this year. He's their security blanket. He's their go-to option in the passing attack. And you take that away in this game, and then you lock down their secondary receivers like Josh Downs and Alec Pierce, although tight ends did feast quite a bit today, more on that later. But with the Falcons pass rush utilizing a lot of blitzes, a lot of stunts, a lot of twists, Ryan Nielsen going back to being that sort of aggressive defensive play caller, you saw this Falcons defense really get after Gardner Minshew. So for me, I had a lot of skepticism going in this game. Could the Falcons run the football? Will Taylor Heinicke protect the football, not turn it over? And will they be able to pressure Gardner Minshew? And the Falcons were able to check all of those boxes, handily, right? And thus prove the skeptics and the doubters wrong, including yours truly on that front. So we'll continue the conversation, but basically what I'll say is I think Arthur Smith just saved his job. I think there's a 94% chance that he's keeping his job. I said that on the postcast with Tanisha Batiste and Jarvis Davis. I wasn't convinced, like other people going into this game, that he was out at the end of this year. I felt like the Falcons wanted to keep Arthur Smith and would be basically looking for any sign of life in these final 3 games to justify Arthur Blank's decision of probably keeping Arthur Smith around in 2024. And I think the Falcons got it in this game. I think this win is going to be enough. Although, that's where the 94% instead of 100% comes in, because there's 2 still games left to play. That 6% is, that margin for error that, when it comes to the Falcons and collapsing in epic fashion at the end of games or end of seasons, that's that 6% margin for error. So I can't say with 100% certainty, but I do think this was probably more than enough for Arthur Smith to sort of save his job, assuming that the Falcons don't go out there and, play two of the worst games that they've ever played to finish out the season, which again, why even put that out there in the ether? Because it's like, oh, Falcons are like, oh, you mean we can absolutely suck for the next 2 weeks? Okay, we'll do that. So we'll see what the Falcons wind up doing. But, I think what you saw in this game was the Falcons showing what, the Arthur Smith pitch has been, all year long that he just, and this team hasn't really delivered on, which is let's control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball with our run game, our D line, and our pass rush, right? And then let's sprinkle in some explosiveness, right? You got 5 20+ yard plays, 3 of which came on the ground, which have not been common this year like they were a year ago with those explosive runs. So I think, you got 3 big issues that this Falcons team is going to have to address this offseason. Again, I know the season's not over, and why are we talking about offseason? But me, we'll talk more about it. But they got to figure out the quarterback position. Heinicke ain't the guy. More on that later, right? They need to add more explosiveness on offense, right? That's where the wide receiver position, so we can get more of these explosive plays that we saw in this game. And you'll see this team continue to beef up the defense, especially that D-line and that pass rush, so that these types of games that we had against the Colts, are much more common next season when the quality of quarterback is going to be just a little bit higher than Gardner Minshew. When you look at the Falcons, potential schedule next year. So, I think Smith is basically going to go to Arthur Blank, the Falcons owner, and say, hey, the way that we played this Sunday, we can play like this every single week, all year long. Just give me another shot. And I think Arthur Blank is going to wind up believing him. At least I feel 94% confident that Arthur Blank will wind up believing him. So we will talk more about Taylor Heinicke and his performance in this. We'll talk more about why part of the reason why, despite the impressive performance of the Falcons today, it's hard to get kind of excited at this point in the year because it feels like it's too little, too late. And while you feel good about this win, it's hard to feel great about this win. And we'll break that down to continue today's Locked On Falcons. So the weather is getting colder, but the NFL offers at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, stay hot this time of year. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with a winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team does win. Right? I'm so used to saying your team doesn't win because I cover the Atlanta Falcons, but there's no better time to get in on the action at FanDuel than right now. And whether you want to bet money line, you can bet spreads, player props, over unders. It's all on an app that's super easy to use. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon right now to get started and stay warm and cozy this winter. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. So continuing today's Locked On Falcons, want to plug the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel. If you're looking for that holiday fix, you get away from the family for a few moments, go tune in to Locked On Sports Atlanta, get all the biggest updates and storylines from not only the NFL, NBA, NHL, all the major sports, MLB, all that stuff and more at Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 YouTube streaming channel. So let's talk about why this win, despite its impressive, again, I'm only speaking for myself. Again, I'm sure plenty of you are telling me right now in the chat and in the comments why you feel very differently, but sort of intellectually, I recognize this as probably the most impressive win of the Falcons this season, right? You just look at the scoreboard. It's definitely the most impressive win on the scoreboard, right? We've been talking about one score wins all game long. We've been talking about seeing this offense put up 27 plus points this year, doing that, potentially getting this close to a 30 burger. Again, Heineke was a little better in the red zone. We probably would have got that 30 burger. So I feel good about this win, but I don't feel great about this win because it feels like, as I said last week, like emotionally, I'm checked out on the season at this point in time. It's like, okay, well, do whatever you do, Falcons, but like, you're not going to get me to sort of buy in. It's a little too late, right? Because this was kind of the sort of game that we expected from this team most weeks this season on offense, and we haven't gotten it. And of course, the questions are going to be, did the quarterback change prompt this? I'm skeptical. To me, this was so similar to what we talked about after Heineke's insertion into the game in the second half of the Titans game, and you saw a boost, right? This sort of, increase in quote unquote energy at the end of the Titans game. And people were like, hey, that's why we need to go with Taylor Heinicke for the rest of the season, right? And basically the argument I made then was like, I don't think it was Heinicke. I think it was the fact that the Falcons ran the ball, right? Like in the second half against the Titans, I think that's true on Sunday. You had the three-headed monster in the backfield working, right? Patterson, Robinson, and Algier all had their moments and contributions, were able to control the line of scrimmage with the blocking, with the run game. It wasn't as if Heinicke was dropping back and throwing a ton in this game and being this sort of catalyst to your offensive success, like we were hoping to see more from Desmond Ridder. You were just asking Heinicke to kind of manage the game, and he did that, right? I think it's not some energy that Heinicke's bringing to the table, right? I think it's just you saw the Falcons living up to the identity that we've been talking about for 9+ months of what this team's identity is supposed to be, right? I sit here and I go, again, being a skeptic, right? A non-member of the Heinicke Hive, but to me, more important than the quarterback change was Drew Dahlman and Chris Lindstrom coming back healthy this week. Tucker Fisk stepping in for Keith Smith, right? Kind of muddying the waters of the Parker Hesse agenda, with his performance today. So that's going to be, a big issue that I'm going to have to deal with over the holiday. But, kudos to Taylor Heinicke. I thought he was mostly solid today, right? He made enough plays to kind of keep things rolling, keep things on schedule, right? I suspect when I watch the film, I'm not going to be super impressed with him. We'll see, right? Watching the game live, it seemed like he was late on a bunch of throws. It seemed pretty consistently on third downs. He was low on a bunch of throws, especially some checkdowns that kind of limited Yak ability, right? There was probably 2 or 3 turnover-worthy plays, right? He had a bobble snap at the beginning of the second, excuse me, at the beginning of the second half that was lucky to be recovered by the Falcons, right? In that case, that wasn't on the center. He just took the shotgun snap and it bounced off his hands, right? So we'll see kind of what the film says. But I know Arthur Smith said post-game, one of the quotes coming out of his post-game press conference was, Heinicke got the team into a rhythm. And I'm like, Heinicke seemed like, to me, again, my perception, we'll see how this perception changes once I watch the film. But it seems like Heinicke was doing his own thing. He was marching to the beat of his own drum because, again, he was late on a bunch of throws. But, it is what it is, right? So we'll see if I, watch the film on Tuesday and come away feeling better or worse about Heinicke's performance in this game. But again, this game kind of sums up what we've been talking about, for 9+ months, going into the season, what we wanted to see. We don't need to see elite quarterback play, right? All that to say, all that criticism of Taylor Heinicke. We don't need to see elite quarterback play because you have these other things working for you, the run game, the defense, right? That's what this team was built to be, a run-first, defensive-driven team. We've seen the defense drive it. We haven't seen the run game consistently show up. When it has, the Falcons have done pretty well. I mean, you look at their 5 best run games rushing the ball were probably week 1, week 2, week 7, week 12, and today, right? Falcons are 5-0 in those games. That's weird. Is that a weird coincidence? I don't think so, right? So that to me is sort of the thing that sort of stood out to me. Now, the question or not is going to be, are we going to continue to see this Falcon team over these final 2 games? Maybe, right? As sort of the person who wouldn't be here, right? I'm the OG Falcons complainer, right? It's a mixed bag, right? When it comes to this, right? Because you look at it, like, I'm glad that we got this type of game at some point this year, but again, it feels like it's a little too late. So again, that's why, like, I'm coming off as like being negative, because I'm just like, all right, like, cool, man. I'm glad you did it, but like, literally, right? Had you done this any other week prior to today, we would have been jumping for joy. Any other week, 15 times you had a chance to, kick the football and Lucy pulled, yanked it out from under Charlie Brown. And then, the 16th try when Lucy went home, right? And the ball was just sitting on the ground. Charlie Brown just came and just kicked it. Did I say Charlie Murphy or Charlie Brown? Whatever. Charlie Murphy. So we'll see, right? Playoff hopes still live, right? Don't know what the odds are. I tried to look it up before I jumped on, but didn't see anybody posting about it. But this is the type of performance that the Falcons do, where they give you that false hope, like, oh, they'll finish the season strong, just so they can pull the rug out from under you, pull that football away from you the next time you go out to line up for that kick. So we'll see if the Falcons do that, or they actually, for once, Hey, it ain't how you start, it's how you finish, right? So I guess, hey, your three best games came at the very end of the season. So again, another reason for Arthur Smith to justify it. So we'll see what happens with this team. We'll wrap up today's episode. Got some positive news on Jake Matthews' injury status, as well as some other players. There's a bit of a youth movement in the secondary. What does that mean for the rest of the season, as well as the offseason? And we'll break that down as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. But first, I want to tell you about the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, comedy, and theater near you. That is Game Time. They have the killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, right? The view from your seat means that you'll see where you're sitting before you buy, right? All in prices mean you're not going to get hit by hidden fees. You can buy last minute tickets right up to the start of the event and sometimes even after. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, they'll credit you 110% the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So the plan for tomorrow's episode will be a potential Q&A, as well as, having slept on it, maybe have some additional thoughts on the game. But if you want to submit your questions for tomorrow's episode, by all means, do so via email at lockedonfalcons@mail.com. Leave a comment on this video, or you get priority if you're a Locked On Falcons insider. The link to join and become an insider is in the description below at joinsubtext.com/lockedonfalcons. So odds and ends, right? Just sort of last little tidbits as we wrap up today's episode. Let's talk a little bit about the injury situation. Jake Matthews exited the game midway through the fourth quarter with a knee injury, got rolled up from behind on a big run from Bijan that set up the penultimate field goal. And Arthur Smith said post-game that he could have returned if they needed him to. So that's a promising sign that Jake's start streak won't end next week against the Bears, and we'll need him against Montez Sweat and all that. His replacement, John LeGlue, was stepped in. It was a swing tackle today. He was a Falcons practice squad guy for the last 6 or so weeks that they promoted ahead of today's game over Tyler Vrabel, who's been filling in for Jake in recent games. Now the hope is that Caleb McGarry is going to be back next week, so that Storm Norton can be kind of your swing tackle again. So we'll see on that front. Other injury news: Lorenzo Carter and Chris Lindstrom both exited the game briefly to get checked for neck and head injuries, respectively. They did clear the concussion protocol, so hopefully that's a promising sign. Although, again, as a longtime cover of this team, it wouldn't be the first time that a Falcon player got hurt in a game, came back in the game, and then missed 4 weeks after that. That's always a possibility. But last little tidbit that stood out to me watching the game was we did see Clark Phillips and DeMarcco Hellams get their second starts over Jeff Okudah and Richie Grant, respectively, at cornerback and safety. Personally, I don't feel great about that. It's nice to see the rookies contributing, but I don't see either one being starters moving forward. And I feel like, trying to figure out if you're going to keep Jeff Okudah would be the best way to utilize his final few weeks. But maybe the Falcons have already made that decision that Okudah won't be returning next year, and thus, cornerback potentially becomes a higher priority, one of the potential top 5 needs, because I don't see Clark Phillips as a long-term starter. To me, he'd be a pretty limited starter, most games, but we'll see about that. The same I sort of feel about DeMarcco Hellams. He's played well as a starter these last 2 weeks, and it's to me, but his skill set I think is limited, right? So we'll see where that is. Richie Grant has served as that dime safety. I think that's kind of the best role for Richie Grant moving forward. We've seen, I know he gave up that game-winning touchdown to the Bucs, but outside of that one play, I thought he played reasonably well that game. And I think since the bye week, Richie has played mostly well in limited action. And so we're seeing that part-time role kind of ideally suited for him. We've seen him impact as a pass rusher. We saw that again on Sunday against the Colts. So, we still see struggles at covering tight ends. It didn't seem like DeMarcco Hellams was solving that problem, because tight ends feasted today, right? With Pittman out, it was just basically the Will Mallory and Kylan Granson show all day long. They combined for 9 catches for 119 yards. And I'm sure you're like, who the heck are Will Mallory and Kylan Granson? And all you need to know is they're Colts, so they're super athletic tight ends that were able to out athlete our safeties. And so I look at these two positions, corner and safety, as two positions that should be offseason priorities to upgrade for the Falcons. And it goes back to a conversation we had last week about while the conversation tends to focus on the head coach and the quarterback and the need to make changes there, the Falcons have a number of areas they have to improve. I'm sorry, including becoming more explosive on offense, improving that pass rush. Again, we need to stabilize the offensive line, even though, relatively speaking, you're probably not going to see like a massive overhaul. Besides, maybe drafting some more depth and maybe signing a veteran or two to sort of be a backup, so that you're not relying on the John LeGlues of the world to sort of have to fill in the future. But these other areas of need, cornerback, safety, etc., I think are going to be other issues that the Falcons are going to have to deal with. And again, that's why despite all the focus being on Desmond Ridder and Arthur Smith as being the problem, right? I think the problem is bigger than those guys, right? The question always was, they may not be singularly the problem, but are they the solution? And I think it's still, obviously with Desmond Ridder, we're all skeptical on whether he's a solution. Skeptical is probably put it mildly. That's what I'll say at this point in time. Yeah, he's not the solution. That's basically what I'm saying. So, I know that's upsetting to a handful of you guys. Arthur Smith, is he the solution? I don't feel great about that, but it is what it is. As I said, he's going to get that opportunity to prove us right or wrong, probably in all likelihood next year. So we'll see what else the Falcons have in store this all season, and whether or not they can build off of this game over these next 2 weeks, and then carry that momentum into the offseason and build off of that next year. And that's going to be a frequent conversation all off season long. So but that's going to do it for our conversation today. We'll potentially be back tomorrow with a Q&A. I don't want to overpromise because it depends on if you guys submit questions. I don't know how much more I'm going to have to say about this game 12 hours from now, when I'm sitting down Christmas morning and recording an episode. Me, I love to do mailbags when I don't got anything else to talk about. So it depends on you guys sending in mailbag questions, right? So send in your questions via email, lockedonfalcons@mail.com, via Twitter @LockedOnFalcons, via threads @FalcFans. If that's where you want to go, you can comment here on this video as well. And of course, if you want priority to guarantee that your question get answered on potentially tomorrow's mailbag episode, become a Locked On Falcons insider. Join the link in the description below at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons. Locked On Falcons insiders not only get priority when it comes to Q&As and mailbags, right? You get that one-on-one access. Even if your question isn't for the show, you can, hit me up at 12:05 being like, hey, Aaron, how do you know if your eggnog has gone bad on Christmas evening? I'll be there for you, right? That's the one-on-one access that you get me. Maybe you should call poison control first, but if you believe in me and you want to be an insider, then by all means, hit me up on Locked On Falcons Insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons. And in addition to that one-on-one access, you get, bury the lead. You get the extended all 22 reviews. That's the real reason why you guys are insiders, because you get that high def HD film breakdown in addition to the audio breakdown as a Locked On Falcons insider. So join that 14-day free trial, $4.99 a month. So hit me up. If we're not doing a mailbag because you guys let me down by not asking you questions, I'm putting it on you. It's always y'all's fault. It's never my fault. Then we'll probably have like a holiday special from like Mike Renner and I think Ross Jackson potentially on the feed. So you'll get some content on Christmas when you sneak away. It's just a question. It all depends on you. So, hit me up with your questions, Falcons or non-Falcons related. If you just, need my thoughts on Christmas cookies, and hey, I got you. Other things, whatever. Who knows? Let me know. Hit me up. That's going to do it for us, guys. Here, continue to make us your first listen. Obviously, got to ramble at the end of the episode, just like the old days. So it's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Check out Locked On Sports Today, 24/7 streaming channel